I lit the candles, set the table, chilled the same bottle of wine we shared at our wedding, but he never came home. 1 hour later, a bank alert popped up on my phone. $472. Le Jardin Céleste, our anniversary dinner, the one he told me he was too busy to have. I called the restaurant, asked what he was wearing. They said a navy suit, with a young woman in red. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true revenge stories. We were never flashy, no grand gestures, no weekly roses or dramatic getaways, just solid. 4 years ago, we signed our names on marriage papers, a mortgage, and a biotech startup we'd built together from scratch. I believed in Julien, in his vision, in his mind, in the way he made the world seem smaller, manageable when I was spinning. We made a quiet kind of love, the kind that holds your hand during hospital visits, that remembers your coffee order during audits, that texts home in 20 even when the world is burning. So when he said he couldn't make our anniversary dinner because of a board meeting, I didn't argue. I just said, okay, rain check, I'll save the wine. I spent that night going through old pictures, planning to make a slideshow for us, something nostalgic, soft, sweet. I opened our cloud folder, the one labeled Elise and Julien. It held years of birthdays, pitch decks, vacation pics, and 2 grainy ultrasound scans that still made my chest tighten. The folder had 112 images, but one didn't belong. It was newer, time-stamped 2 nights ago. A girl, mid-20s, smiling at the camera in soft candlelight, red dress. Le Jardin Céleste in the background. I recognized the chandeliers. At first I thought it was PR content. He'd mentioned onboarding a new intern, but then I clicked next. Another photo, this time Julienne's hand resting on the table. Her fingers gently touching his, not official, not posed, just familiar. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. She was in my slideshow, in the middle of our memories, casually dropped between a photo from our honeymoon and one from our last New Year's. And I don't know what hurt more, that he put her in there or that he didn't even bother hiding it. I remembered meeting her, just once, maybe twice. She'd come by the office to shadow the comms team. A quiet girl, almost polite to a fault. Long auburn hair, gold wire glasses, the kind of look that says, I still call my mom every night. Julien introduced her like she was an afterthought. This is Kayla, intern, smart, background in journalism. He didn't look at her then. Or maybe he did, and I didn't notice. I offered a brief smile, extended a hand. She gave a nervous nod, then turned her eyes back to her phone. She seemed harmless. Isn't that how it always begins? Not with lipstick on a collar, but with silence, with just an intern. With not remembering when you stopped asking questions. I closed the slideshow and opened our financial records, just to distract myself. Just for something to do. A charge from Sephora. $86.70. Julien never wore cologne. Another from Lush. Bath bombs. I hovered over the entries, not sure what I was looking for. And then it hit me. I had given him a secondary credit card. For work expenses. For emergencies. I opened the transaction log. Dinner, hotel, wine, concert tickets. All recent. All tagged under PR events. I clicked into our Spotify account. Julien didn't make playlists. He barely used the app, but there it was, Red Velvet Night. Romantic jazz curated perfectly. Our song, the one we danced to at our wedding, was on there. So was another, the one I caught Kayla humming in the hallway weeks ago. He didn't just cheat. He reused the template. Same songs, same restaurant, same hand-on-back smile he used to give me when he pulled out my chair. I don't know how long I sat there. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock that suddenly sounded too loud. I wasn't crying, I wasn't panicking, just watching myself fall apart in reverse. I remembered what Diane, his mother, once said to me. You've made Julien a better man. He was wild before you. Maybe he still was. Maybe he just got better at hiding it. There were no love notes, no secret chats I could print out, just receipts, images, patterns, truths scattered like puzzle pieces that only made sense when I stopped pretending they didn't fit. At some point I got up, walked to the window. The city blinked quietly under soft Louisiana rain, the kind that smelled like magnolia and heat. I whispered, she's not even old enough to rent the car he drove her in. And still she was the one he chose to celebrate with, the one who sat where I was supposed to, the The one who got the wine I chilled, the dessert I ordered, and the story he should have been writing with me. Now tell me, if you really saw it, would you let it slide to protect your pride? Or would you watch, wait, and strike when the silence gets too loud to ignore? The next day, I went into the office like nothing had changed. Hair pulled back, black blazer, same coffee mug with the chip on the rim. Julienne was in a meeting. Kayla sat outside his door typing furiously. She didn't look up as I passed, but I could feel that flicker of hesitation, that almost smile people give when they don't know how much you know. I stopped at the copier just across from her. "Morning," I said flat. She jumped a little, then smiled too brightly. "Hi, morning." Her blouse was cream silk, the exact same shade as the one I wore at last year's launch party. The one Julienne said made me look sharp but soft. I remembered because I'd bought it after 3 back-to-back failed investor calls. He'd made dinner that night, told me I carried the weight of the company like a general. That blouse now clung to her like borrowed confidence. Working on the pitch deck, I asked, eyes scanning her screen. "Yeah," Julienne said, to reuse the format from last quarter. She turned the laptop slightly so I couldn't see more. "Smart girl." I nodded, pretending not to notice the font was changed. Noticed instead the soft smile she had when she typed Genesis values, the way her fingers moved like she'd done it before. Later in the break room, I found her playlist on the speaker queue, Red Velvet Night. I stared at the name, didn't flinch, just turned the volume down. "Nice song choice," I said, sipping my tea. She blinked, flushed, mumbled something about it being from her Discover Weekly. I almost laughed. The girl in the frame wasn't just in the slideshow, she was here, breathing my air, living inside my margins. What struck me most wasn't her boldness. It was the lack of fear. She acted like I wouldn't notice, or worse, like I already knew and didn't care. Julienne came home late that night, again. It was 11:42. I heard the garage before I heard his footsteps. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie like he always did. Same routine, same face. But something in his eyes hesitated half a beat too long. "Long meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He kissed my forehead, then reached for the fridge. "Yeah. Board keeps pushing on quarterly numbers. You know how it goes." Except I didn't, not this time. I'd stepped back from operations 2 quarters ago, but I still saw the reports. The board hadn't requested anything new this week. He opened a LaCroix, sipped, didn't meet my eyes. I sat at the island, hands folded. "No dinner?" He shook his head. "We grabbed something quick after. Thai. He hates Thai. Always said the spices made his face break out. But he didn't flinch when he lied. That was new. I waited. Waited for him to ask how my day was, what I'd had for lunch, whether I'd booked our anniversary trip reschedule. He didn't. Instead, he changed the subject, asked about the neighbor's fence renovation. I excused myself, went upstairs, opened the shared laptop, the old Mac we used to plan our honeymoon. The password didn't work. He must have changed it, without telling me. I went to my office instead, logged into our synced email on the backup account. Just to check the calendar, there it was. A lunch block, 2 hours, title Investor Connect, off-site. Location blank. But attached accidentally, I suppose, was a confirmation from Le Petit Jardin. 2 entrees, 1 wine pairing, reservation for 2. The time, same window as his board meeting. I clicked on the receipt. The guest name, Julienne Moreau. The email, it was sent to his personal one. The one we only used for friends and family. I sat there, staring at it. So many lies, so ordinary. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just details, slipped and braided into the fabric of our days, like they belonged there. He wasn't hiding an affair. He was living it inside the same schedule, same calendar, same inbox where we used to plan our life. The next time he came home late, I poured 2 glasses of red. Same bottle we'd opened on our 2nd anniversary, a full-bodied Malbec from Mendoza. The one he said tasted like velvet and sin. He smiled when he saw it. "Fancy tonight," I handed him the glass. "To long nights," I said. He clinked, sipped. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. Watched his eyes glance down at the screen behind me. Reflected faintly in the oven door. There was a pink mark barely there on his collar. Not lipstick. Lip balm, maybe. Or nothing at all, but it hadn't been there when he left that morning. So I said casually, "How was lunch at Le Petit Jardin?" He blinked. A beat too long. "Lunch. I tilted my head, smiling. Someone mentioned seeing you there. You know that place's foie gras gets talked about. He laughed too loud. Oh yeah. Ran into an old colleague. From Stanford. Last minute. He reached for the bottle, poured more, didn't look up. Julian had never studied at Stanford. He went to Tulane. I didn't correct him, just let it hang, like a loose thread. That weekend I checked the car. The backseat mat had a receipt wedged under it, $186 from a boutique bakery, custom order, 1 cake, shaped like a book with the words, "To fresh chapters." I looked up the bakery's Instagram. The cake had been posted blurred background, just a corner, but clear enough. 2 hands in frame, his and hers. Her nails painted mauve. Mine were bare all week. I zoomed in. The caption read, "Sweet endings, sweeter beginnings, no tags, no faces." But I recognized the ring on his hand. The one I bought him for our engagement, engraved inside, "Yours, always." He used to twist it nervously when he spoke in public. Now he wore it like camouflage. Like he thought as long as it stayed on, he could do whatever he wanted and still be considered mine. That night he kissed my forehead before bed. Said, "You're my piece, Elise." I smiled in the dark. He'd said that before, years ago, but back then it sounded like gratitude. Now it sounded like a license. Julian forgot to lock his office. That was his first mistake. The second was assuming I'd stopped looking. I walked in after hours. The lights were dim. The air smelled like paper and cologne. His laptop sat open, sleep mode flickering faintly. I moved the mouse, typed the old password, our wedding date. It still worked. I didn't even feel guilty. The screen came alive. Tabs were open: Dropbox, Slack, WeTransfer. I clicked into the Dropbox folder. There it was, a zipped file named Kayla Pitch Final. I opened it. Inside, a series of polished slides, brand colors, same layout I'd built for Julian's original investor deck. Except now the team slide had a new face. Her face. Kayla Mercer, Director of Strategic Communications. I stared at the screen, her photo taken in front of our office wall wearing a blazer I'd left at work 3 weeks ago. He hadn't just given her a job. He gave her my seat. I scrolled further, a notes document titled Lunch Talking Points. KM, it outlined answers to questions she might face if someone asks about our relationship. Answers. Prepared lies. One line stood out. "We met through work, bonded over vision, supportive of his marriage, but aligned on future goals. Supportive of his marriage." I read it twice. She didn't deny it. She framed it as respectful, like I was a footnote, a phase. I backed out, opened his Instagram drafts. The last photo saved Kayla in a bookstore, laughing, holding a poetry book I once gifted Julian on our first trip to San Francisco. Same store, same corner, same damn book. The caption, "Sometimes people walk into your life to remind you who you are." He hadn't posted it, yet. I copied the folder, dragged it to a flash drive from my bag, labeled it June expenses, fitting. That night I lay beside him in bed, his arm heavy around me, his breathing steady. He still wore the ring, still mumbled my name in his sleep, but something had cracked. Not the pattern me. If your name is still on his mailbox, but not in his future, when do you stop pretending you live there? I stared at the ceiling. The fan spun in slow circles, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the room. Julian snored beside me, peacefully, as if nothing in his world had changed. Maybe it hadn't. Maybe I was the only one who realized we weren't the same couple who used to sneak out of board meetings for late-night tacos, the same pair who painted our first apartment walls by hand and left messy fingerprints we never washed off. I remembered the first time he said, "I love you." It wasn't during a romantic trip, not under fireworks. It was in the middle of a fight. I was about to walk out. He grabbed my hand and said, "I love you. That's why I don't let go." But he had let go. Not all at once. Just fingertip by fingertip, until I was the only one still holding on. I thought about confronting him, showing him the photos, the calendar invites, the deck with her name, wearing my clothes, pitching my ideas. But what would that change? He wasn't sorry. He was careful, and I wasn't confused anymore. I reached for the drawer, took out the second flash drive I'd labeled Le Jardin. It held everything: receipts, screenshots, travel logs, voice memos. I slipped it into my bag right next to the envelope with my lawyer's card. Not yet, but soon. Sometimes revenge doesn't start with shouting. It begins with silence and ends when you finally stop asking why. It started with a calendar invite. Julien had one scheduled for our anniversary dinner, still labeled rain check, Elise. He'd never deleted it. He just moved it 3 weeks forward and then conveniently forgot. I moved it back. Same date, same hour, same restaurant. Le Jardin Céleste, the place he thought was his secret. Now it would be our final set piece. I booked a table for 2. Name on the reservation, Kayla Mercer. It wasn't hard. She'd used it before he'd used it for her. They assumed no one would cross-reference receipts or staff logs. They assumed wrong. Over the next 4 days, I reconstructed the pattern, her class schedule, his meeting blocks, spending timestamps. Even the weather from nights they went out, I added it all into a spreadsheet. It looked like an affair, but it read like a business plan. 2 people budgeting their betrayal. I called Margot my best friend since undergrad. Corporate law, steel trap memory, not the type to cry during movies. Need a little cleanup, I told her over tea. Quiet and surgical. She didn't ask why. She just said, email me the assets. You want NDA breach first or civil both, I replied. I wasn't looking for punishment. I was looking for documentation. Because when men like Julien fall, they try to rewrite the story, and I wouldn't let him. Next, I printed the photos, labeled every receipt, numbered each video segment from the restaurant's security feeds. I even added sticky notes color-coded. Not for drama, just to remind myself, this was real, this happened. Truth doesn't scream, it whispers in perfect detail. I made him breakfast the morning of our dinner. Poached eggs, avocado toast, fresh grapefruit juice with a touch of rosemary. He looked surprised. Wow, this is fancy, he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I let him. He wore the cologne I bought him for his birthday last year, the one Kayla complimented on Slack. Thought we could start fresh, I smiled. Our rain-checked anniversary dinner is tonight. His brows lifted just slightly. Then he nodded. Right, I completely forgot. What time again? 7, I said, sipping my coffee. Le Jardin, I already confirmed. He hesitated a fraction too long, then covered it with a grin. Perfect. I'll finish early today. Of course he would. Kayla wasn't on the calendar. I watched him button his cufflinks. He struggled slightly with the left sleeve. I used to do it for him, but this time I let him fumble. At work, I greeted her. Kayla, I said warmly, passing by her desk. Big pitch coming soon. She looked up startled, then smiled. Yes, we're finalizing it with Julien this week. Good, I've seen the deck. It's impressive. Her expression shifted, the kind you get when you don't know if you've just been complimented or caught. At lunch, I sent the email, blind copy to Margot. Subject for release if needed. Attached a zip file labeled Celeste. Inside timeline financial logs. Comms records, and one 47-second clip of Julien placing his hand over Kayla's in the same booth where we once celebrated our engagement. The same hand that used to tremble when it touched me. That night I wore white, simple, elegant. He told me once white made me look untouchable. Tonight, that was the point. I arrived at 6:58. The maitre d' greeted me with a polite nod. Ms. Mercer, right this way. I smiled. Didn't correct him. They were already seated. Candlelight flickering, Julien in his navy suit, Kayla in red. She laughed at something he whispered. Her fingers brushed the stem of her wine glass. His hand rested on the table palm, up open familiar. They didn't see me right away. I stepped forward slowly, heels silent on the marble floor. Stopped just behind her chair. She turned first, eyes widened. Smile froze. Julien looked up, and for the first time in months, he couldn't speak. Don't get up, I said calmly, wouldn't want to interrupt. I placed the slim black box on the table. USB, no logos, just truth sealed in plastic. Kayla blinked. Julien reached for it. I placed my hand on his wrist gently, like an afterthought. It's all there, I said. Every reservation, every receipt. Your pitch deck, her calendar, your accounts. His mouth opened. No sound. Kayla whispered, Elise. I cut in without raising my voice. You're not the first, but you'll be the last who gets silence from me. Julien stood up too fast. His chair screeched across the floor. A few heads turned. He leaned in. We can talk. I stepped back. I've already talked. To my lawyer, to the board, to your investors. I pulled a slim envelope from my purse, placed it next to the wine list. Consider this your official notice of asset separation. Everything else is frozen and monitored. I looked at Kayla, her face pale now, hands trembling. You may want to step back from the pitch, Kayla, unless you enjoy lawsuits more than launch decks. I turned. No more words. As I walked out, the maitre d' opened the door for me. He said, "Your car is ready, ma'am." I didn't correct him either, not that night. Not ever again. I didn't turn around. Not when Julienne called my name. Not when Kayla followed me out into the valet line, her heels clicking like panic. She didn't say a word, just stood there, arms crossed, shivering. It was 74 degrees. The car pulled up. I got in, window down. She took a hesitant step forward. "Elise, were you watching us this whole time?" I tilted my head. "No," I said. I was watching me. The door closed, the car drove off, and behind me the story finally began to unravel. Julienne tried to contain it, tried to explain to the board that I was acting out of jealousy, that he and Kayla were simply close collaborators. He tried charm, then guilt, then silence, but the board didn't care about emotions. They cared about ethics, liability, optics. Margot made sure every document was timed precisely, emails sent just before the investor review, financials forwarded to the compliance lead, screenshots to the PR head with one subject line. Flag before media does. It took 48 hours. Julienne was removed as spokesperson, placed on internal audit, his equity suspended pending investigation. Kayla was escorted out of the building. HR called it a mutual separation. Someone left a cupcake on her desk with a single pink candle. No one claimed it. I watched it all happen from my apartment window, one building across. Binoculars. Black coffee, phone on silent. My name never came up. I'd never raised my voice, never posted online, never even told my parents. I just stepped back and watched gravity do its job. That's the thing about the truth. It doesn't need force. It just needs release. The next week, a box arrived at my office. No return label, just my name, neat cursive. Inside the bracelet Julian gave me on our first anniversary, gold, minimal, engraved always. J, no note, no apology, just the sound of something ending. I tucked it into a drawer, didn't even flinch. That same day, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered. Silence at first, then a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Elise, it's Diane, Julian's mother. I don't know what he did, but I know he's lost everything, and I wanted you to know I never believed the rumors. You didn't destroy him. He did that all by himself." I closed my eyes. Her voice cracked. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. I wasn't lying. Kayla deleted her LinkedIn profile. Her Instagram went dark. A friend said she moved back to Virginia. Teaching yoga? Or maybe Pilates? No one really knew. Julian tried launching something new, some smaller biotech spin-off, but no one bit. His name carried baggage now. His pitches too practiced. His eyes a little too tired to sell vision. I didn't gloat. Didn't show up at the same conferences. Didn't take interviews. I just moved, quietly, out of the apartment, out of the city, into a small town north of Asheville where no one knew my name, where I could build again this time, not for someone else. One night I sat on my porch, a thunderstorm rolling in. No noise but cicadas and wind. I thought about all the things I never said, all the ways I'd learned to make silence work for me. Justice didn't come in court, or with headlines. It came in sleep, in peace. In the knowledge that I never had to ask for the truth because I had the receipts. People kept asking if I missed him, as if habit and heartbreak were the same thing, as if time spent together meant something once the lies arrived. I didn't miss Julienne. I missed who I thought he was, the version of him I'd built from memory, from loyalty, from all the nights I defended him even in my own mind. But you know what I miss more, me? The version of me before I started apologizing for other people's choices, before I lowered my standards to keep a marriage afloat, before I learned that silence can be love and also surrender. Now I eat alone, not in sadness, but in peace. I book trips without asking anyone's schedule. I laugh louder, I wear red again. And sometimes when someone asks me, "What happened between you two?" I smile and say, "We stopped being on the same side. That's it. No drama, no gossip. Because here's what no one tells you. Closure isn't loud. It's not a final fight or a perfect revenge. Closure is clarity, when you look at the truth and stop negotiating with it. When you walk away without needing anyone else to understand why. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't scream. I just stopped showing up to the life he tried to live without me. And that was the cleanest break I've ever made. Where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you've ever been betrayed but kept your voice steady. Subscribe to hear more stories like this one. You're not alone.